Oh, that's interesting. Anyway.
Let me do something. I just didn't turn off my... Okay. Okay, I'm going to start in 10 seconds.
Okay.
Starting now.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning. Welcome to the DBA Fundamentals virtual chapter meeting for November. Today we're going to have Robert Verell doing a presentation on Know Your Roles. It's a very good presentation. I've seen it here locally and I think you're going to really enjoy it. My name is Steve Cantrell and I'm the chapter co-leader of the DBA Fundamentals virtual chapter. We will be recording this session and it will be available in our archive session probably within a couple of days along with slides and scripts from Robert. We'd like to thank our sponsor, SQL Sentry. As you know, I announced in the last presentation that we now have a sponsor, and as part of that sponsorship, they're going to give away a professional version of Plan Explorer each month. We did one in October, and we're going to do one in November. We're going to do one in December. We're also going to give away $300 as part of our sponsorship funds in December, and that's going to just be randomly drawn from everybody that attended sessions in October, November, and December, either with our normal sessions here at Central Standard Time or our sessions in Australia. So, and that the same goes for the professional version of SQL Sentry. Plan Explorer, that will be given away for November, this session and one other one. So good luck to everybody. And we'd like to thank SQL Sentry for deciding that we were good enough to sponsor. Next month, on December the 8th, we'll have a Central Standard Time Zone session, end-to-end troubleshooting for SQL Server by Kevin Klein. That's going to be a good session. That'll be at our normal 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Central Standard Time Zone. We'll also have one on the 8th, but it'll be the 8th in Australia. So if you convert it back to United States time, if that's where you're listening from, Central Standard Time will be 8:30 p.m. on Monday night on the 7th. That'll be Index Fragmentation, Internals, Analysis, and Solutions with Paul Randall. I think you'll enjoy that. So if you want to make it to that, try to hit the, don't forget that it will be actually on December the 7th at 8:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. Starting in January, January the 5th, we'll have silent killers lurking in your schema. We think we need to kind of turn to a little bit different areas to try to make sure that we're getting the best performance possible. Mickey Stu will be giving that presentation. She's had great presentations every time she's been here for us. Other presentations that are coming up this month, the DBA virtual chapter will be giving a session on SQL servers as a cloud service on Wednesday the 11th, tomorrow at 12 noon Mountain. Rise of the Machine Learning, Azure, Machine Language, and BI, the Business Analytics virtual chapter will be giving that on 11/18 at 12 noon. And Optimizing Your Data Warehouse for OLAP Processing, the virtual performance, or the performance chapter, we'll be giving that on 11/19. So that's a highlight of 3 in the near future to look at. Okay, that's all the housekeeping I can think of, so let's get on with the show. Robert Verell, as I said, will be presenting Know Your Roles. Robert is a SQL Server professional working in the Nashville area. That's where we're from. And he's one of the leaders of the local chapter, and I've heard him give lots of great sessions locally, and I finally talked him into doing a virtual session for us. Currently, he's a database administrator at Health Springs, a Cigna company, and he's been working with SQL Server for over 10 years. I'll let him go into talking about his presentation, so I'm going to turn it over to you now, Robert.
All right, sounds good. Thank you for the kind words, Steve. I really appreciate that. But yeah, so my session today is Security Know Your Roles. This was the very first session that I ever put together, and I put it together way back, I guess about 3 years ago, and I started by giving the session at my local user group, and I eventually evolved and gave it to I've given it to several SQL Saturdays now, and I put this together whenever I was a junior DBA. Really, I was still very much a spring chicken, as it were, and if anything, I want everybody to be encouraged that, you know, it doesn't matter your skill level. You can put together a presentation, and if you do put it together, and you'll find that you'll learn something, because you're expected to be the subject matter expert whenever you give a session. And anyway, that's my spiel about how everybody should get into speaking. It's another way that you can. It's another learning opportunity, not just by going to the sessions, but actually giving one yourself. So here on my title screen, I have The Rock, Dwayne The Rock Johnson. I was hoping for something that would be, you know, something rather catchy, because I try to throw somewhat funny things or funny things to me in my sessions. The best thing I could think of was he always has that big saying. Yeah, he's a big trash talker in wrestling, and he says, know your roles, and he also says, shut your mouth. But, you know, I want people to speak up, so I didn't put that on my title screen. All right, so moving along. So who am I? My name's Robert Verell. As Stephen said, I'm a DBA at Cigna Health Spring. I've been there since 2011, so I've been there about 4 years. Prior to that, I worked as an implementation specialist at a mortgage lender, and while I was there, I was doing junior .NET development, and I decided that I didn't want to do that anymore. I wanted to do just databases, and I self-taught myself SSIS, and I was like, wow, this is amazing stuff. I don't want to do any of that .NET stuff anymore. It creeps me out when I ever have to touch it anymore. I've gone through and I've gotten my MCITP in database administration for 2008. I'm working on upgrading that. I've been working on upgrading that for probably 2 or 3 years now. If you would like to reach me on Twitter, I am at SQL Cowbell. My email address here is at the bottom. I'll also have that at the last slide for contact information. And this year I've started a blog called sqlcowbell.com, and I've got a little WordPress blog that I've put out there. So you may be wondering why SQL Cowbell, and the reason why is because I'm a very big Mississippi State fan. Whenever I gave this session the very first time, way back in 2012, Craig Utley was presented right before I did, and he's a big Louisiana, or not Louisiana, but Louisville Cards fan. And he gave it in February, and then 2 months later, they won the national championship in college basketball. And so following that, I gave my session, and 2 months later, my team made it to the College World Series in baseball. So I like having this slide in there as kind of some good karma, as it were, especially since we're playing Alabama in football this week. So let's hope this gives some good mojo. All right. Moving forward. So let's actually get to what we're talking about today. Enough about me. So what's for discussion? So we'll talk about the principle of least privilege and how it's important. We'll go over kind of a high-level review of server roles. We'll talk about why you should never give DB owner the database role to anybody ever at any time. I'll take any and all challenges to that. For anybody who wants to test me on that, I'm a big proponent of never giving that to any user at any time. We'll talk about explicit permissions and implicit permissions as well, and we'll also go over some other commonly used roles and ones that you should avoid using even more than DB owner. And with all of this, we'll look at using all of these in a shared consolidated development environment or like an internal cloud if you wanted to. The whole reason this session came about is at HealthSpring we had a consolidation project that went on. We had Microsoft that came in and they did a scan of everywhere that we had SQL Server running, and it was decided that we could save money on licensing purposes by doing a consolidation project. Well, we did production, and it was fairly easy. From a permission standpoint, at least, you basically just move all the permissions over because we already had good practices for security at the server level in prod. But we decided we could get even better gains by consolidating lower environments as well, and it would it would teach those development teams to kind of be in harmony with each other, as it were, and make sure that their databases would be able to play nicely as well. And if we needed to, and we found that one database needed more resources, we could move it to another instance if need be. So let's move along. So let's talk about principle of least privilege. Why should we use it? Well, for ease of troubleshooting is always my first thing. So let's say you have a table that just magically disappears. Well, there's only a certain number of roles or explicit permissions that will give you the ability to drop a table. If there's a short list of that, then you're going to know potentially who the culprits are. And so it makes it easier for finding out problems such as that. Another reason you should use it is because it's good for deployment simplicity in larger environments. And it also just gives you better security overall. A lot of security these days is focused more on passwords and social media mining and SQL injection, and those are all very important things to look at. But if we simply give users the rights that they need and only the things that they need, then that overall gives us better security as well. And so even if someone gets their password hacked in some sort of fashion, maybe they don't have access to very much stuff. Maybe they don't have access to sensitive data. And so that's another way that we can help protect our data. This also, in principle of least privilege, it's a best practice by Microsoft, and it will also assist in HIPAA and SOX as well if you're under those regulations. So let's do a high-level review of server roles. So the first one I have is security admin. This is used for creating logins at the server level, as well as assigning server roles at the server level. Setup admin, which is used for creating link servers. And to go back to my consolidation example, and I try to do this session as telling a story, we wanted to look over the server roles, and as far as consolidating lower environments like dev, we wanted to see, well, what roles should we give the users and development teams? And so we decided to start looking at the server roles. So the next one we looked at was DB creator. Well, we didn't want one team to be able to come through and create as many databases as they wanted to and basically just completely flood an instance with new databases. So we decided that was kind of out. And as you can imagine, DB Creator naturally gives you the ability to create databases on an instance. So then we looked at server admin, and this is for server-side settings. You can do a lot of configuration level changes with the server admin role. We didn't want to give that either. Disk admin we found was a very rarely used role. It's more for managing backup devices, and it's something that I've never seen assigned anywhere, and I can't really think of a reason why you would want to do that. We looked at bulk admin as well, and we found that a lot of the developers didn't really use bulk insert, and that's what bulk admin is for. You don't have to have bulk admin to do BCP in or out, but if you want to do a bulk insert command, which is different from BCP, then you have to have the bulk admin right at the server level. And then I also have process admin, and this is used to kill SPIDs essentially. Now you'll notice that I left the big daddy off. I left sysadmin off here because I have a completely dedicated slide for it. Sysadmin is the big dog, and it's such a strong role that even if you try to limit any kind of permissions at the server level for a sysadmin, it's not going to work for them because they can just log in with their sysadmin credentials and then turn around and remove whatever you've put on there. So as long as they have the ability to connect to SQL Server, then they will be able to make those changes. So, and we decided we didn't want to give the development team sysadmin rights. And there's a long list of reasons of why people ask for sysadmin, but as you can see from the previous slide, if they need things like that, then if they need to do bulk inserts, what they really just need is bulk admin. If they need to create databases, they need DB creator. If they want to create link servers, they need setup admin. If they want to run traces, there's not a server level role for that, but there is an explicit permission
Hello, um, Robert. We just lost you.
Yeah, my headphones are almost dead, and I'm having trouble keeping the plug in place. Can you hear me okay now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, great. I've got it plugged in really well now, so I hopefully that won't happen again. I apologize about
Oh,
that.
that's okay.
So anyway, as I was saying, if you want the ability to run traces, then you'll need the alter trace permission. And if you want to create logins, you'll need security admin. Now you'll see here at the bottom, I put a little star by security admin, and the reason why is because this role is considered a little bit of a loophole. It's a good role to give to your junior DBAs, but if you give someone security admin, they have the ability to give someone else sysadmin rights. So they could essentially turn around with security admin and give themselves sysadmin rights. And from that perspective, it's a security loophole. And so it's something that if you give that right to somebody, you should really keep an eye on. The server level security for it. So we decided we didn't really want to give any kind of server level rights to anybody. We didn't even want to give people alter trace. So we decided to look at the database level roles. And the first one we obviously thought of was, well, what about DB owner? Well, I started looking into DB owner, and I was like, so what all does this really give us the ability to do? And the reasons why developers usually ask for DB owner, especially in a development environment, would be they want to do things like this. They want to create objects. Of course, developers want to be able to do that, and they should be able to. They want to be able to execute procedures and functions and test those kind of things out, and they want to be able to and those sort of options, and they should be able to do that. They want to be able to truncate tables naturally. Truncating is a much faster option if you're wanting to completely clean a table out than a delete, especially if it's a very large table. They want to be able to performance tune. Naturally, we want our developers performance tuning if they're doing that. We want them doing that. So we want to give them the ability to see query plans and to troubleshoot and make their queries faster by having that ability. Sometimes they want to be able to manage user permissions and roles at the database level. Well, that's maybe not. As a DBA, I don't know if I'm really big on that. And the last thing they want to be able to do is, of course, they want to be able to script out objects. Well, I thought I had this, code in place, and I also had it in our Subversion environment, or TFS, or something along those lines. And well, it turns out the version is wrong, so I need to be able to script out that procedure. Naturally, that's something that you want to be able to give to your developers. Well, we were cool with most of these things, but we turned around and looked at the other things that we'd be able to do as well. And it also gives you the ability to alter symmetric keys. Well, that could be potentially dangerous if you have some sensitive data. Even in a dev environment, they might be able to secure this with a different key, and that would pose a potential issue to you. Backup database. Do you want them to be able to ad hoc just run a backup against the database, or what if you're in not a prod environment, but you're in more of like a UAT environment or high-level testing environment, and because of that, you want to match prod and you have everything in the full recovery model. Well, if they have DB owner, they'll be able to run a backup database and back up the database log, and they could potentially just delete that log. Maybe they go through and they ran some sort of command, and that filled up the log, and they're like, well, I just need to run, I just need to back up the log real quick, and I'll just delete that out of the way. Well, now you've lost your restore chain in case that needs to come back for whatever reason. Another thing is alter any roles. So let's say you have a custom role set up, and it explicitly gives certain things to people. Well, if you have DB owner, you have the right to be able to go through and change any kind of custom roles that you have. And then you have the big one here, which is at the database level, alter database, which gives you this nice long laundry list of things that you'd be able to do. And these are all a little scary. Turn on off auto shrink. You should never have auto shrink on. Please don't ever turn on auto shrink. Auto update statistics. if you want statistics automatically being created or not, then you want to be able to manage that as a administrator on that database. Add file. So let's say someone goes through, in similar instance that we had with backup database. Let's say they run some sort of process and they run out of data space, or they fill up a log. Well, they've decided that they're going to go through and they're going to add a new data file or a log file on the C drive, and they're going to let it just grow as big as they want to. No big deal, right? Plenty of space on the C drive, and we know that there's plenty of space there. Well, that could potentially bring down the entire server, and that would be a bad thing. Here's a really nice one here. Set offline read only. You can set the database to be offline, but with DB owner, but you can't turn around and also bring it back online. And if anything, that right there is the biggest reason why you should never give DB owner. I can't think of a single reason why you would want to be able to take a database offline, but then not be able to bring it back online. That just baffles me. Change recovery model. That's along the same lines as backup database. If you have it in simple or full, you have the ability to flip that back and forth. That's something that that could basically make you have to drop everything that you're doing and turn around and have to administrate a database. Recursive triggers. If you have a vendor database and they want this on or off, they could potentially turn this off and then come complain to you about, well, this app isn't working the way it's supposed to be, even in UAT. And once again, that's more work that you'll have to do. And the biggest one, of course, is drop database, and it would obviously just drop the database. If that's in a lower environment but that database needs to be there for some sort of testing purpose, and that database just disappears, that would be a big problem. So we started looking at, we decided we weren't going to give anybody DB owner. We decided to think, well, what can we do for a workaround? And we got thinking about it, and we were like, okay, well, what if we give people custom schemas? So what I want to do now is I want to do a kind of a schema review, as it were. And let me make sure that you guys can see what I am seeing here.
Looks good.
All right. All right, good. So I want to show you this here, and I've gone through on my instance here. I have a 2016 instance because I've been playing around with that. It's really good stuff, and for preparing for the new version, the next version, you should definitely download the CTP and try it out. And here's where a little bit of irony steps in. I'm going to create a new login, and I'm going to give it a blank password for simplicity's purpose. So I'm giving a security session, and there's no password. The database that I'm going to use is going to be, I've got an AdventureWorks 2014 database out here. And here's what else I'm going to do. I'm going to create a user in AdventureWorks 2014. I'm going to create a schema with the same name as the login and the user. And I'm going to make it the owner of the schema. And then I'm going to make it the default schema for the user. And then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give it read rights in this database. And our thinking here is, well, if we do this and they have their own schema, they can do whatever the heck they want in their schema, and we can, it's like its own container, right? Well, let's see it. Let's check and make sure that that's exactly the way that we want it to be, and it works how we want. So down here, you can see that I'm logged in as schema user. Down here in the bottom right, schema user, and I'm SPID73. And I'm going to do a create table. Now, for this exercise, what I want to do is kind of get your minds working here, and I want you to think, and you can raise your hand if you think it'll work. But I'm going to try to create a table in the schema that I own. Remember, I'm schema user. I own the schema user, and I'm going to create a new table. So think about if you think it's going to work or not. All right, do you have your answer? All right, here we go. And it did not work. Create table permission denied in database AdventureWorks 2014. So I can't run create table commands apparently, not on my schema. Well, let's think about this though. All right, well, I gave data reader rights, right? So I should be able to run select queries. Well, what if I run this select star into, which will also create a table in my schema here, and I'm basically just going to run a select star into from this. Once again, think about, do you think this will work or not? All right, here, if you have your answer, here we go. Same thing. That basically does nothing but a create table statement. Well, what if we tried from a different schema? Maybe it's the DBO schema that's messing us up. Maybe this is throwing us off. What if we tried from a custom schema itself, and since I have a custom schema, maybe that'll make things different. Let's try one more time. No, it still doesn't work. So we have all this set up, and our developer comes back and says, well, Mr. DBA, I'm not able to create tables, so this schema thing that you gave me, it's pretty much worthless. So as a DBA, we come through and we say, all right, well, I'll tell you what, this is what I'll do. I'll create the table for you, okay? And then I'm going to grant you the rights to create table, okay? So now the Mr. Schema user comes back over here and says, oh, bless you, thank you. Now I've got my table out here and I can play around with it, right? Well, let's see here. What all can we do? Remember, I created this table, schema user new table, and all I want to do is run an insert statement. So once again, be thinking in your mind, is this statement going to work? Am I going to be able to run this insert into new table and I just have a very simple table here. It's just a simple char value. Is this insert statement going to work? You have your answer? Of course it'll work. Why wouldn't it? All right. What about an update? Would an update work? Is that going to work as well? Sure, absolutely. What about a delete? Will I be able to delete from it? Now I'm removing things from it. Do you have your answer? Sure. Why not? Why wouldn't I be able to delete? All right. Now let's get a little bit more advanced. That was fairly simple. Let's get a little more advanced. What about adding columns? Would I be able to add columns to my table? Who thinks they'll be able to add columns? Do we have a way of seeing if we have hands raised? Who thinks we'll be able to raise your hand in the thing if you think that we'll be able to alter the table and add a column?
I only see one hand raised.
Really? A lot of skeptics. Okay. Well, let's give it a try.
Two.
Okay. All right. Well, there. And it ran just fine. So I'm able to alter the table. What about truncate? It's a little bit different. Truncate table. Have your answer? Sure, you can truncate. No problem. What about drop the table? Oh, now I didn't create the table. Schema user did not create this table, so will I be able to drop it? Sure I can drop it. And the reason why I'm able to do all these things is because I have the implied alter ability on the schema. Since I own the schema, I have the implied ability of altering it. I like to think of giving a user a schema as similar to giving my 2-year-old daughter a toy. She can alter it any way she wants. She can put Play-Doh on it and add to it if she wants to, or glue or whatever the heck she wants. She can delete it, she can truncate it, she can break it if she wants to, but she can't create one on her own. I had to explicitly give the rights to create table in order to make that work. So now, since I've dropped it, I did drop that right. Yeah, I did. Now I'll go through and make sure that I can recreate it. So who thinks that I'll be able to create this table? Remember, I did explicitly give rights. How many hands do we got right now? Who else saying yes?
3.
3.
No, it was about 5 or 6. Sorry.
Okay. All right. We got some people on board now. All right. We got some people that agree, and yes, I am able to create this on my schema user schema. Well, what about in DBO? Will I be able to create a table in DBO? This is a different schema. But I did come through, and remember, I granted create table, right? So you think that I'd be able to create a table here, yes? I cannot. And the reason why this doesn't work is because this is the default schema for this user. Okay? So it defaulted to assuming that grant create table was only on the schema user schema. All right, so let's move along. Let's talk about store procedures. What about create store procedure? Will I be able to create a store procedure? I have a real simple one here. It's just a select one for simplicity's purposes. I cannot create a store procedure. All right, so schema user comes back to DBA and says, well, I need to be able to have this store procedure created. So it's like, all right, well, I'll create the procedure for you, and then I'll turn around and I'll grant you the ability to create the procedure as well. All right, well, now that I have create procedure and my procedure is in place, I didn't create it myself, can I execute it? Who thinks I'll be able to execute this store procedure?
1 out of 230.
Sure.
That person was right.
That's pretty good if you're the only one out of 230. Sure you can execute it. Execute is also kind of falls under the alter permissions, as it were. Since schema user owns the schema, they're able to run execute against it. What about alter the procedure? Instead of select 1, I want to change it to select 2. I'll be able to alter it? Sure, why not?
5.
What about, all right, we're getting there. What about drop? Drop procedure. Sure, why not? And naturally, I can go through and I can create this now if I want to, because I have the create procedure right. There. So, back to our slides here. So now we understand how custom schemas work. Really good. So let's talk about some advantages to using them. If you use custom schemas, there's no guessing on what objects are for an app and what is custom. This is sort of the vendor example. So if you have a vendor that comes in and says, well, you can't do anything with any of the tables in our database, you can't mess with any of those, then you can, if you want to, if you don't want to create a separate database, you can simply create a schema in that database and let that be kind of your playground or sandbox or custom views or whatever you'd like. Can, of course, create your own separate view database or something along those lines if you want to. I'm not knocking that by any purpose, but I'm just giving you that as another option. I like making sure that all the options are on the table for things. As I said, all the objects in the DBO schema are left intact, and maybe you'd have less use of temp tables if you had a custom schema, if you had sort of a temp schema, as it were. TempDB is a database that's shared by every database and every user on the instance. But if you had a work table or a temp table that was used or a custom schema area on a database, then maybe that might get used a little bit less. And also, if you have things in a custom schema, then like I said, you have the removal of that need for cross-database permissions. So if you have your own separate view database, then you'll have to have some sort of cross-database permissions set up, whether you give rights to both databases or you set up trusting or something along those lines. Anyway, so now I'll come to a questions slide on custom schemas. Any questions on this? We want to make sure that we understand this. We ultimately decided to not really use custom schemas for our dev consolidation example, but it is something that we always kind of have in the back of our head for potential use. Anyway, any questions?
Yes. One user asked, can I grant authorization to schemas to more than one user at one time?
You can. Honestly, if you go the route of having custom schemas, And let's say that user leaves and they have lots of, like leaves the company or leaves and goes to another team or something along those lines. But they have a lot of good solid work in it. They have good store procedures in there and lots of good code, and you don't want to get rid of it, and you don't really want to move it to the DBO schema because for naming purposes, let's say the name is the objects names are the same. What you can do is you can take the DBO user, which is a system user, and set it up to be the owner of that schema. So yes, you can own multiple schemas as a user.
Okay, this is a comment of if the vendor wants to refresh an entire database, the restore will wipe out the custom schema.
That is correct to an extent, unless you set it up to where there is a partial restore. So if you have that custom schema set up, but then you also turn around and have your own file group set up, you could have all of your custom schema objects in its own file group, and that would give you the ability to keep all of that stuff in there. And so you could do a partial restore of just that file group, and that would get you back all of your custom stuff.
Okay, this user asked, how is it you were able to insert, update, delete if you only granted DB data reader?
Oh, well, so the reason why is because I gave them, I let them own a schema, okay? So, and they weren't, and that, the way the user was set up, and let me go back to that. The way the user was set up is if you give someone a schema, it's a security container, okay? And if you set it up to where they own it, it's much like giving them DB owner rights on that schema. So they can do almost anything they want in it, but the reason why they weren't able to create tables and procedures is because a schema is simply a security container. It's not a database. If you want to be able to actually create objects, they need to have that explicit create table or create procedure or create function explicit permission in order to do that.
Okay, this is a general overall question,
Okay.
maybe a direction of what this user wanted out of the session. How can I grant read and write, insert, update, delete permissions to a user in all tables and all databases in an instance in a simple way?
Wow. So I'll do the thing that people always say is, can you repeat the question, please?
How can I grant read and write, insert, update, delete permissions to a user in all tables, in all databases, in an instance, in a simple way? Obviously, I guess without doing DB owner.
Yeah, you can absolutely do that without having DB owner. You give them the sysadmin right, and they would have the ability to do that. Yes. In a simple way, that's the simplest way to do it.
Well, one other user brought up the fact that you can create your own custom role as of 2012. So that's another possibility.
At the server level, yes, you can. Yes. I don't really touch on that, and one of the reasons why is 2012 had either just come out or wasn't quite out yet when I first put the session together, and so I don't really dive into server level roles or custom server level roles, as I should say. But they are a good alternative to things.
Now, this is a sort of a somewhat side question, but can an AD user pool data with OLEDB and ODBC and the likes with these rights that you're given with schemas?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, another question just came in. I'm sorry, another question just came in. What's your view on the access to be granted for an SSIS proxy account and your view for access to service accounts in general?
For service accounts, that's kind of a completely different topic, so I'm not really going to go into that.
Okay. Maybe they can do questions offline with you or something.
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to answer that offline. I will say I only got about 20 minutes left, and I've probably got about 30 minutes more of material, so I'm going to try to fly through this.
Okay.
But I do have a couple of the question spots. So anyway, let me get back to this and move forward.
Okay.
All right.
We can handle it that way.
So I know what you're thinking. You can use the custom schemas. Alternatively, is you can create an alternative instead of giving people DB owner. And you can give this role whatever name you want. And you can do something similar along the lines where I was doing, where I gave them create table and create procedure and things of the like, and you can name it whatever you want. I like naming mine DB developer, but if you want, you can give it a DB creator as a database level role instead. You can give it not as cool as DBAs or Ninja Sauce. This is always a favorite whenever I give the session live. They like this as an alternative. You can change how DB owner looks and put a 0 instead of an O, so you can tell the folks, yeah, I gave you DB owner rights. Don't you see that? That'd be a nice little trick to play on them. RAR, I'm not DB owner, or whatever. The idea is that you don't give them a role that's DB owner. So I have a custom role that I've already set up that does this, and it's not DB owner. So let's take a quick look at that, and this will be really fast. So here's my developer role. Okay, and you can see here it gives all sorts of explicit rights to different things. It gets it grants delete at the entire server level, so there's no inherited roles as far as that goes to. And I gave them, you see here, I gave them create role, and I want to say that I gave did I give any kind of symmetric key stuff? I guess I didn't. The important thing to note about this, and really the entire exercise here as far as explicit permissions goes, is to understand what those explicit permissions give you and to think to yourself, what works best for my environment? I went through and did this because I felt this was the best for my environment. It might not work the best for yours. Anyway, and you'll see down here at the bottom, most of these are pretty straightforward. You know, create schema, create table, and create procedure. And I have alter stuff up here, but none of them are alter database, of course. And I have stuff like show plan and view database state and view definition and things like that. I'm going to go over those in here in just a second. So you've been hearing me talk about, here's my favorite slide in the entire session. You've been hearing me talk about implicit and explicit permissions. And for semantics, I want to go over this and give a little bit of analogy, and this is my urine analogy. I like giving this. So we have one of my favorite movies, one of the best movies of all time. We have Shawshank Redemption, and we have the character Red, who is done by Morgan Freeman, a fantastic actor, and he's also from Mississippi as well. And let's talk about explicit permissions. While Red is in prison, if he wants to be able to pee, he has to explicitly ask to pee. Okay? He's not a free man. He doesn't have any kind of rights. So he has to explicitly ask for that right in order to be able to go pee. Now, later in the movie, he gets out of jail, and he talks about how he has issues in the real world with, you know, going to the bathroom. And the reason being is he's always used to having to ask for this explicit right. Well, now that he's a free man, he implicitly has the right to go pee whenever he wants. All right, so that's my pee-pee analogy. But now you understand the difference between explicit and implicit. All right, so let's talk about explicit database permissions. And these aren't the ones that are fairly straightforward, like select, insert, update, delete, create, and alter. So there's control. Control goes all the way across the four-part name. It's at the server level, the database level, the schema level, and the object level. And this is implied as the highest level of permission you can have. So if you have sysadmin rights, you're implied control at the server level. If you have DB owner rights, you're implied control at the database level. If you own a schema, you're implied control on a schema. Okay? All right, show plan. This gives you the ability to see execution plans, which is really important to have, and that's why I had that in my custom role. View database state. This gives you the ability to see several DMVs that will give you statistics and things like that, and tell you what's kind of going on in your database. And view definition, of course, is the ability to script out objects. Now, there is a view any definition at the server level that you can also grant that gives them the ability to script out any object on the entire server, including stuff like replication if they want to. Oh, and references is the last one I have here, and that gives you the ability to set up foreign keys. So let's talk about impersonation. I like using impersonation. what you can do whenever you want to go set up these rights is you can test your setup of one security with execute as. You can test using users or logins, but not groups, and that has to do with how Active Directory interacts with SQL Server. You can test with a user or a login, but not with an actual group. The workaround of that is you give the rights to one person in the group and have them test their rights out, and if it works the way that they want to, then you can turn around and give the group the exact same rights that you gave that person and then remove that person from the server if you wish to. And the way that you switch back to your permissions is you use the revert commands. Impersonation is sometimes used in store procedures with execute as owner or something along those lines in order to have someone have the ability to execute a procedure as the owner of the database. But we're going to, here in a second, look at a demo of that. And everybody's heard of DML and DDL. Who's heard of DCL? This is kind of a third language in t-sql, and it's called data control language. And this is where you get your grants, which gives permissions to something, your deny, which explicitly says that you can't do something, your revoke, which removes rights from something, and your with grant, which grants the right to something, but then also gives them the ability, the grantor, the rights to turn around and grant, deny, and revoke on that same object. Okay. What am I looking for here? Yes, this is what I'm looking for. All right, so let's come back over here to Schema User. And I don't have that demo in here anymore. So that's going to be a demo that doesn't actually exist. All right, so moving right along. Basically, the idea behind it is you can let me go back a slide here. You can use execute as, and if you use execute as user or execute as login, it will literally change your security context to be that of the person that you select as. So you can turn around and run a select query and see what that returns as that user. Or even if you have sysadmin rights, if you run an execute as user, you'll be running the stuff as that user, and you might not be able to create a table or create a database. In order to get back to that, use the revert permissions. And to be fair, I honestly didn't have enough time to go through that demo anyway. So, all right. So other commonly used database roles, and these are the ones that we're a little bit more familiar with. We got DB data reader. This implies select. Data writer, which implies insert, update, delete. And DDL admin, which implies create and alter. When alter also implies drop. Now, none of these are cumulative. If you give someone DDL admin, they will not have the ability to insert. If you give someone data writer, they won't be able to run select queries. Okay? Now, I highly recommend using AD groups. I don't really know if I have time for that demo or not. We might come back to it if I have time for it. But I want to cover one more thing. So actually, you know what? I'm going to go through it. I think I can bust through it.
Go ahead and do it. If it takes a few extra minutes, we'll handle that.
Okay. All right. AD group checker. So what I have here is I have a quick little. What I like to do, especially in my consolidated dev environment, is I like to go through and basically have my own groups set up in Active Directory. So what I can do is I can run this little query here, and it'll tell me what groups that I don't have on my instance. Now what I can do is I can take this list and give it to someone who has rights in Active Directory to turn around and create these if you don't have that. And then the next thing that you do is you can run this, and it will basically grant rights as you wish with the role that you want. So here I have checking for _dev, and what this will do is it will go through and create for _dev and give my DB developer role. So I could create this on my consolidated dev environment and basically have AD groups for basically anybody who's going to come in and do any kind of development work. Whenever they leave, I don't have to go through and delete their user and delete their login and all the whole other 9 yards. I can just tell my Active Directory team to just basically remove them from all their groups, and then I'm done. So from a management perspective, that's a lot easier to take care of. All right, so that was fairly quick. All right, so the other thing that on our consolidated dev environment that they wanted to be able to do is they wanted to be able to do stuff with jobs and automate stuff. That's good. We want our developers doing that as DBAs. We want that to happen. All right, so we wanted to go over the MSDB roles, and we looked at them and we said, okay, what do these all give? Well, the agent operator role gives us the ability to create jobs and execute jobs, and it also gives us the ability to view job history. If you get the operator role, it also gives you the reader and user role as well. The reader role does not allow you to create jobs, but still gives you the ability to execute jobs that you own. I should note that, though. Is that right? Is that right? Let me think about that. Yeah, operator gives you the rights to run any job on the instance. The reader role gives you the rights to run just jobs that you own. You have to be the owner of the job. And it also gives you the rights to view the job history. And then the SQL agent user role only gives you the rights to execute jobs that you own. You can't view job history. This SSIS limited user here is really good for having the ability to create SSIS packages and upload them into SSIS. There's 2 more here: DC admin, which is data control admin, and DBSSIS admin. You should never give these. Much similar to the security admin role, these are both roles that are security loopholes, because you can basically create a package that turns around and runs as SA and will give anybody sysadmin rights. So we decided we were going to give agent operator role as well as a few other things, and we wanted to put all this together and have our nice consolidated dev environment and have everybody play nicely. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to have our elevated role. We use DB developer. We scripted it out. We also put it in the model database. Any migrated databases that we move to dev, we have to manually add the role because it won't automatically do it in model. But if you create new databases, it'll have it in it. And then whenever you migrate those databases, you'll need to remove anybody out of DB owner and put them into the DB developer role. The next thing you need to do is you'll need to set up MSDB permissions for users. In MSDB, you're going to give them SSIS limited user and the agent operator role. The next thing you'll do is you'll create a credential. And what I did for this was I basically just used the agent service account. And you also create a proxy for it as well. So I created a proxy, and this is the name for it, and I put my credential in here. And for my developers, I gave them the ability to do these certain things. If you want to be able to give them the rights to do PowerShell or something along those lines, perfectly fine. Go ahead and do that. Next thing we have to do, step 4, is we have to add users that are going to use this functionality in the agent in order to be able to run jobs and stuff. And then we had to teach users that any kind of non-t-sql job that they might have would have to use that proxy that we created back in step 3. The next thing you have to do is at the server level is add any users that you want that are going to use SSIS and the agent to distributed COM users, DCOM users. And then you'll have to turn around and add DCOM users to MSDTS server 100 for 2008. For 2012, it's actually SQL Server Integration Services 10.0, I believe, or 11, or yeah, it's 11.0. But in 2008, they have it named very poorly, as it were. But in further versions like 2012 and forward, they have a little bit better naming for it. And they'll need remote launch, activation, and remote access. And you have to restart SSIS. And since this is on 2 different screens, I have 2 different screens for it here. Okay. Then you have to think about, what about configurations for packages? Well, I beg of you to not use config files. I'm a DBA, I back up databases. If you put your configuration settings in a table, I can back that up. I don't necessarily back up file locations. And really for that, it's really simple. All you do is you just create a shared folder and add whatever users or groups that are going to need the ability to have XML configuration files. So as a final review, here is the list of things it would do. So you got the role, MSDB roles, credential and proxy, teach them how to create job steps, decom setup, and how they're going to do SSIS packages. Now, it's worth noting that if you're in 2012, you don't have to do half of this stuff if you use the project model, and I encourage everybody to use the project model. That's how Microsoft wants us to do development for SSIS. And if you go that route, you don't have to do this decom setup. You can literally just create a folder, and I'll show you that I have here. So I have an integration services catalog, and you literally just create a folder, and then for that folder, I created this user called John Brown, and I gave them all the rights that they need to it. There's no need to having to go through and do all that stuff with decom. You literally just give them rights to SSIS-DB, create a folder, and give them rights like this. It's very, very simple. There's no server-side tweaking or anything like that you have to do. So I will say that while I don't condone ever giving anybody DB owner, there are vendors out there who, either through ignorance or pure laziness, they will go through and in their application code, they will check to see if the user that is running stuff for their application is in the DB owner role. That is so awful. It is so, so bad. Well, if you have to give that role in order for an application to work from that perspective, independent of going through and asking them to change how that works, what you can do is you can set up a WMI alert. And yes, you can do what I'm about to show you using policy-based management. When I first did this session, I couldn't find a really good example for that. And so I found a way to do it through WMI. I found a different way of doing it. This is also really good if you have a junior DBA on your team that you don't trust as far as you can throw them. So if you have someone you're not really sure, I don't know if I trust anybody. So I like having this on pretty much any server that I have. So what I have here is let me find the thing for it here. Let me just close this out. Here it is. So I have these two alerts here. I have database role membership change and server role membership change. Here's the code behind these. If you'll notice over here, I have a link to that, so it'll be in my slides, and I have a little blog that I did about it, and I also have two links from Microsoft that kind of entail a sample setup as well, plus all the different things that you can monitor for in WMI. And for these, I've got my WMI query is audit add member to DB role event, and the other one is add login to server role event. And so these will basically these will fire off an alert and alert whatever operator that I deem to set up. For this one, I'm using something called DBAdmin. And whenever you add someone to a server role or database role, it will send you an email and tell you that has happened. So if you have somewhere you have to give someone DB owner and you want to keep an eye on who they're going to set up as users and things like that, have those alerts in place and they'll keep you straight. All right, that is finally all that I have. Questions on anything?
Okay, we have, there's sporadic questions.
Okay.
If we have an object which is encrypted, then can any role decode that code? So
if they have the passwords for it, then yes.
Okay. Let's see. How do you give users the ability to read a database diagram but not modify any objects?
That's a really good question. I do not know. I legitimately do not know. Database diagrams isn't something that I really play around with that much, and so I honestly have no idea. I will have to go and look and see. I'm not sure.
Well,
let me throw one more thing in here too. I've had questions as far as the consolidated dev environment goes, and I've had things like, well, what if I wanted to create a database snapshot? Well, you have to have SA rights in order to be able to do that. Or what if I want to be able to restore over my database, or I have some kind of screw up that I did? I would say for any kind of instances like that, go through and create a job that's owned by SA, because they won't be able to change it in this instance, because even with the operator role, the agent operator role, you won't be able to change that job, and basically have code in it that goes through and creates a snapshot of that database for that user, or restores a database for that user from whatever location that they wish. And so you can set it up to where it's automated, to where you don't have to do lots of administration on it. Anyway, sorry for that tangent. Please move forward.
What I was going to say is I'm going to send you these questions anyway, just in case I've overlooked something or interpreted something incorrectly, and you can contact users, and you'll have their email address for that. So, this one user, when you first started talking about AD groups, said that he was questioning, is this a normal AD group or that odd one that you need to set up in PowerShell only?
Set up in PowerShell only. I'm not sure I understand that.
I don't either.
Yeah, I mean, you can set up AD groups in PowerShell. I will say that in my environment, it's large enough to where it's segregated to where I don't have rights to set to create AD groups. If you wanted to go through and create a PowerShell script that looked at that list of databases where you did not have those groups set up, and then turn around and tap into Active Directory and create that group, I certainly encourage you to do it if you have the rights to do it. Or if you have like your own container in Active Directory, yeah, sure, go for it. I don't have the code to do that, but I can at least give you the piece that looks for the groups that are missing.
Okay. This one is back to the MSDB operator roles. The SQL agent reader role is unable to view histories of non-owned objects. Granted reader to MSDB view server state and granted view definition. What's missing? I would think that if they had the reader role, they'll be able to. They only are able to view the history. Let's see, what was that?
Yeah, no, so the agent reader role is able to view job history. So and when I say that, I mean you're able to come over here and you know what, I say job history, but I think what I really mean is job activity monitor, but it gives you the rights to see this. And I believe that you can still go through and view history of a job as well. So if something ran, you can go through and check and see why it failed or something, and do troubleshooting, basic troubleshooting.
If it's a non-owned job, they can do that?
I believe so. I believe that's the case.
Okay, so they've got some
I'm pretty positive about that.
You might have to interact with this user directly then, because they may have something they've left out. What's the difference between when a function executes with permission as DBO or DB owner?
So the difference, I see. Well, so DBO is, well, assuming that it's set up the way that I'm thinking, DBO is the database owner. So if you run an execute as owner, then you're running it as DBO. It's essentially the same thing.
Okay, and this user asked, and I think this is the agent reader role, what role do they need to run a SQL job?
Well, that depends. If you want them to be able to run any job on the entire instance, then the operator role will give them that. If you want them to only be able to run jobs that they own, then that would be the lowest permission there. The using principal least privilege would be using the agent user role.
Okay, if there's no more questions, I think that's it. Like I said, I'm going to send you the question log so you can look at it and make sure that everything was covered, and then those few that we needed to do offline. But anyway, I think that's it.
That's all I have.
I want to appreciate you for, thank you for a great session, and would like to have you back in the future sometime.
Sure, I'd love to come back.
Okay.
And I appreciate everyone for joining today. Thank you so much.
Okay, and remember our next sessions will be December the 7th and 8th, the Australian session with Paul Randall, and the session here in the U.S. with Kevin Klein. So be sure and go and sign up for those. Thanks again. Bye. We probably got around, everybody can still hear us, I don't care. They're logging off. We probably got around 250 or so I think we did pretty good on this session. So.
All right. Well, good deal.
You did good.
That's oh, thanks.
There's a lot of thank yous in the question log too. So.
Oh, very good. Just curious, is there a ratings or things that the speaker could do better or anything along those lines?
Well, for the people that are still here, if you want to send any suggestions or anything to Robert, just let him know. And you can send the stuff to us or send them to Robert, and we'll pass it on to him if you send them to us. This was his first virtual session, so it's a little bit different than giving just live stuff, but I think you did really well with it.
All right. Yeah. Good. Like I said, it was a lot of fun. This is kind of going to be, as I told you last night, this is kind of going to be my thing for next year. It'll be easier to give sessions this way than driving somewhere or anything like that. I don't know how many Saturdays I'm going to be able to get out to.
Yeah,
with having 2 young kids.
Yeah, that limits it. And what I'll do is I'll pass around your name to some of the other virtual chapters and keep you filled up.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, so we are throwing it back to you. We are having a November meeting this month. I think it's going to be next Friday.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, if you're able to make it out. If not, no big deal.
No, we'll probably be able to be out there. There's usually 3 or 4 of us that come out.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to sign off then, or do you want me to stay on?
If you want to announce it, there's still 90 people on. If they're in the Nashville area, go ahead.
Yeah, if you're in the Nashville area, come by. As Stephen mentioned at the beginning, I am a chapter leader for, or chapter co-leader, I should say. Lewis Davidson's the other co-leader, and if you're in the Nashville area or going to be in the Nashville area next Friday, come on out, and we're going to have tuning SQL Server for SharePoint.
Oh, that'd be a good one.
Yeah, that'll be a fun session, and it'll be by Daniel Glenn. He runs the SharePoint group in Nashville, and he's also on the board for the BI group that meets at night down in Brentwood and Franklin.
I definitely want to make it to one of those sessions. I haven't made it out to that yet, so yeah, that's a plug for them because, well, depending on where people are from, maybe they can send the information out.
Sure.
Okay, and I'll send you this question log. There's some suggestions in the question log, and yeah, you had a lot of good reviews. That's good.
Okay. Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to expand the question. Oh wait, here it is. Okay.
Yeah, because you can't. Yeah, you've got to pull the question log out to the side. We can have a session if you want to sometime where we just kind of go over some little neat things that other presenters have showed me, and I found things myself. But yeah, I have to expand it because you can't read that. I did my very first session with it, and I didn't pop it out from the viewer there, so it was kind of difficult answering questions.
Yeah.
And what we could have done something with the polls. I could have maybe, if I could reuse a poll, I could have just said, hey, do you think it's going to work or not? And we could have done that each time, and people could vote in like 15, 20 seconds. So one person suggested leaving the questions to the end. Sometimes, but they like the pace of everything too, because sometimes people will go through it too fast and never give a chance for questions. I think you did really good.
Okay. Great. That's a good point. Yeah, this one person said update for SQL 2014, 2016. And I
Yeah.
should. I'm honestly thinking about, since I consider myself somewhat of a security guru to an extent, and the two biggest demos that I did with my 2016 thing, one of them were on the row level security that they have, and I also did an always encrypted demo, and I might have a kind of a deep dive session that just looks into those two things. So I don't know if that would really plug into this session at all, but anyway.
I think it could. I mean, people like to see the newer things that we could do.
Yeah.
We try to have a cross between bare bone basics and things that people can use right out of the chute, and people that are sort of intermediate DBAs.
Yeah. Okay. Right on. So I guess you'll send me any other questions through email, and I can interact with the users after that, or?
Yes.
Because I really do want to look into that that database diagram, because I really don't know, and it's something I want to know too. That was a really good question. It's been a while since I've had a question in this session that I haven't been able to answer, so that was really good.
A lot of times, users will, or the speakers will blog about answers also. So in your virtual stuff, that way, because you're going to be able to see these people. You're not going to be able to see these people easily. Sometimes just blogging about it at your blog afterwards and going over questions that were answered or not answered. It's a good way of doing things.
All right.
Well, anyway, I'll let you go, and I'll talk to you later. I'll probably see you at the local user group.
All right. Sounds good, man. Hey, thanks again, and I'll see you a bit.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
All right.